How do you govern a technology that's as powerful and fast-moving as artificial intelligence? This is one of the biggest legislative challenges of our time. It's a question that really demands more than just rules, it demands wisdom. To really dig into one of the most important answers to that question, we're going to examine a pretty innovative part of the European Union's landmark AI Act. And I should mention, this analysis is inspired by and conducted under the scientific oversight of Professor Vihar Kiskinov, Doctor of Legal Science. This is the core dilemma, isn't it? The one the EU had to face head-on. The AI Act is a first-of-its-kind global effort, and right at its heart is this very sophisticated attempt to find that perfect middle path, somewhere between completely unchecked development and the kind of restrictions that could kill innovation. Let's take a look at how they tackled this. So, here's our roadmap. We'll start by framing the core problem. Then we'll introduce the EU's flexible answer, these codes of conduct. From there, we'll trace how that idea grew and changed, see how these codes are meant to work in the real world, and finally, we'll look at what this all means for the much bigger picture of responsible innovation. The entire foundation of the EU's thinking here is what's called a risk-based approach. It's a very pragmatic idea. It simply recognizes that not all AI systems carry the same potential for harm, so it just doesn't make sense to govern them all with the same heavy-handed rules. This right here, this really gets to the heart of the challenge. For high-risk AI, things in healthcare, law enforcement, it's pretty straightforward. You impose strict, mandatory rules. But what do you do about everything else? That huge category of non-high-risk AI, that's the real puzzle that needed a much more creative solution. And that solution shows up in Article 95 of the Act. It introduces a really powerful yet voluntary tool, codes of conduct. The whole idea is to encourage best practices without needing to bring down the full weight of a legal mandate for every single AI system out there. This is such a great way to think about it. For AI systems that aren't high risk, these codes aren't a legal requirement. Instead, they act as a kind of public promise, a signal to the market, to customers, that a developer is choosing to hold themselves to a higher, more responsible standard. So you see, these codes are actually doing two very important things at once. On one hand, they create a way for these non-high-risk systems to voluntarily adopt some of the really tough technical standards that are required for high-risk systems. And on the other hand, they create a framework for weaving core ethical principles into the fabric of the entire AI ecosystem. Now, an approach this nuanced didn't just appear out of thin air. It's actually the result of a multi-year legislative journey, a long process of debate and refinement that shows a very clear, very deliberate evolution in thinking. You can really track the journey here. It started back in 2021 with a pretty narrow technical focus. But look what happens by 2023. There's this huge shift to explicitly connect these codes to the much bigger idea of trustworthy AI. The final act then locks all of that in, creating a framework that's really grounded in ethics and focused on building public trust.
Okay, so we understand the why behind these codes. That brings us to the really practical questions. How do they actually work? Who gets to create them? And what exactly has to be in them?
What's important to know is that this is designed to be a collaborative process. The Act opens the door for a whole range of people and groups to develop these codes. You have individual companies, you have industry associations, and, this is key, you also have user groups and civil society organizations. This helps ensure the standards reflect not just what developers want, but what the communities impacted by the AI actually need. The law is also very clear about what these codes need to cover. And take a look at this list. It's not just about the tech. It's about the broader human and societal impact of AI, things like environmental sustainability, diversity in the design teams, accessibility, and protecting vulnerable people. It's a much wider perspective. Something you see again and again in this legislation is a focus on small and medium-sized businesses, SMEs, and startups. The lawmakers clearly recognize that these smaller players are often the real engines of innovation, but they just don't have the same deep pockets or legal teams as the tech giants. And this is absolutely critical. The goal is to make sure that being responsible isn't a luxury only huge corporations can afford. By building in support systems, like giving smaller companies priority access to testing environments, these so-called regulatory sandboxes, and simplifying the compliance process, the Act tries to make ethical AI something that's achievable for everyone. All right, let's zoom back out for a moment and look at the bigger picture. what does this whole flexible, voluntary system of codes really mean for the future of AI in Europe, and maybe even for the rest of the world?
If there's one key takeaway, it's this. Through Article 95, the EU AI Act is trying to carve out a third path. It's not the heavy hand of top-down regulation for everything, but it's also not a lawless free-for-all. It's a more nuanced approach that aims to build an ecosystem where safety and innovation can actually exist together and make each other stronger. Ultimately, the strategy here is to shape the market itself. By creating a clear, visible way for companies to show they're committed to ethical practices, the EU is hoping to make trustworthiness a real competitive advantage. The idea is to guide the market toward AI that truly benefits all of us. So, the EU's approach really empowers the industry to take the lead on innovating responsibly. But as this new era of AI regulation gets underway, we're left with a final, crucial question to think about. Will a system that relies on voluntary commitments be strong enough to build the truly trustworthy AI future that we're all hoping for?